Imagine being only 2 years old, sitting completely alone on a 3-day flight to Japan, while your mother, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, waves goodbye from the tarmac. This wasn't a scene from one of her films. It was the start of what many call Shirley MacLaine's 2-year mistake, a decision that would leave her daughter, Sachi Parker, scarred for life. To truly understand the weight of this moment, we have to look past the glitz of the era and step onto that plane in 1958. Commercial aviation was in its infancy compared to the modern luxury we know today. There were no in-flight screens, no direct routes, and certainly no easy ways to keep a toddler calm on a trans-Pacific journey. Sachi was placed on a roaring, vibrating propeller plane, a metal tube that would take 3 grueling days to hop across the ocean from Los Angeles to Tokyo. The flight attendants did their best, but they were strangers. Pinned to the front of Sachi's tiny coat was a paper shipping tag, a physical symbol of her displacement. Her mother, Shirley MacLaine, was on the ground, her career skyrocketing as she became one of the most bankable stars in cinema history. Shirley viewed this departure as a grand, progressive adventure, but for a 2-year-old child, it was the first, terrifying rupture of the maternal bond, a traumatic event that would echo through the rest of her life, setting the stage for a childhood split between 2 completely different worlds. This bizarre decision didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the direct result of a highly unconventional lifestyle pioneered by Shirley MacLaine and her husband, film producer Steve Parker. Married in 1954, the couple quickly realized that they did not fit into the traditional white picket fence mold of post-war America. Instead, they negotiated an open marriage, a secret agreement that allowed both of them to pursue romantic relationships outside of their union, while Shirley stayed in Hollywood to build her empire, starring in iconic films like Billy Wilder's The Apartment and running with the legendary Rat Pack. Steve set up a permanent base in Tokyo to pursue business opportunities. They lived on opposite sides of the globe, communicating sporadically and maintaining their independent lives. When Sachi was born in 1956, she was treated less like a baby who needed maternal warmth and more like an independent entity who had simply joined their orbit. When Sachi turned 2, her parents decided that the traditional model of parenting was too restrictive. Shirley agreed that Sachi should be shipped off to Japan to live permanently with her father, leaving Shirley free to pursue her career and her personal freedom without the daily constraints of motherhood. But wait, because this is where the story takes a sinister, deeply manipulative turn that many people still don't know about. For decades, Shirley MacLaine justified sending her toddler across the globe by claiming it was a desperate, life-saving measure. The public narrative, and the one Sachi was told her entire childhood, was that Frank Sinatra had crossed a high-profile mob boss, and rumors were swirling that Shirley's young daughter was about to be kidnapped by the Mafia as leverage. To protect Sachi, Shirley claimed she had to spirit her away to the safety of Japan. But decades later, Sachi discovered a devastating truth. The entire kidnapping plot was almost certainly a complete fabrication. Steve Parker, Sachi's father, was not just an eccentric producer, he was a master con man. He allegedly fabricated the entire Mafia threat as a brilliant manipulative scheme to get Shirley to send Sachi to Tokyo. Why? Because having Sachi in Japan allowed Steve to secure a massive, endless stream of child support and lifestyle funding from Shirley's massive Hollywood earnings. Money he used to fund his own lavish lifestyle and his mistress's expenses, while Sachi lived in near isolation. When Sachi arrived in Tokyo, she didn't find a protective, nurturing sanctuary. Instead, she was brought into a cold, emotionally barren household run by her father and his live-in Japanese mistress, Miko. Sachi was primarily raised by a devout Shinto governess who was hired to manage her daily life. Under the governess's strict guidance, Sachi was trained in the traditional old-world Japanese ways of absolute meekness, silence, and subservience to male authority. She was taught to suppress her feelings, to never complain, and to make herself as small and invisible as possible. Meanwhile, her father, Steve, was a mercurial man with a severe drinking problem and an unpredictable, explosive temper. He was verbally and emotionally abusive, routinely calling Sachi the idiot and forbidding her from reading books, believing that keeping her uneducated would make her easier to control. Sachi spent her childhood walking on eggshells, living in constant fear of her father's outbursts and starving for a single word of affection that never came. Yet, her life was defined by a bizarre duality. Every summer, Sachi would be packed up again and flown back to Los Angeles to spend time with her mother. Suddenly, she would go from the cold, abusive silence of Tokyo to the dizzying heights of Hollywood glamour. She went from being the forgotten, quiet child to posing on the cover of Life magazine in 1959, presented to the world as the cherished, adorable daughter of a beloved star. Shirley's home in Malibu was a revolving door of elite celebrities. Sachi found herself running down the aisles of private jets, hanging out on movie sets with Jack Nicholson and Jack Lemmon, and spending time with her charismatic uncle, Warren Beatty. But this glamorous summer reality was just a temporary illusion. As soon as the season ended, the Hollywood fantasy would vanish, and Sachi would be put back on a plane to Tokyo, returned to the isolation and neglect of her father's house. This constant emotional whiplash left Sachi deeply scarred, unable to understand which version of her life was real, and wondering why her mother only seemed to love her when the cameras were rolling. As the years went on, Shirley MacLaine's lifestyle underwent a massive public transformation. By the 1970s and 80s, she had become one of the world's most famous champions of New Age philosophy, writing bestsellers about reincarnation, past lives, astral projection, and extraterrestrial civilizations. But while these books brought comfort and curiosity to millions of readers, they served a much darker, self-serving purpose in Shirley's personal life. She used her spiritual beliefs as the ultimate psychological defense mechanism to justify her systemic neglect of Sachi. In Shirley's cosmic worldview, children are not vulnerable beings who require parental protection and emotional security. Instead, they are highly evolved, sovereign souls who consciously choose their parents and their life circumstances before birth to burn off past life karma. By framing her neglect as a spiritual contract, Shirley completely absolved herself of maternal guilt. If Sachi was lonely, isolated, or abused, it wasn't because Shirley had abandoned her. It was simply Sachi's soul choosing that specific path for her own spiritual evolution. This spiritual bypassing made any real emotional connection between mother and daughter nearly impossible. When Sachi, as an adult, tried to confront Shirley about the deep pain and loneliness of her childhood, Shirley would launch into long-winded, bizarre lectures. She told Sachi that in past lives, they had been sisters, lovers, and even mortal enemies in ancient Egypt. She claimed that Sachi was actually an advanced spiritual entity who didn't need traditional parenting, and that their current mother-daughter bond was just a minor, temporary arrangement in a grand cosmic cycle. How do you argue with a mother who reframes her abandonment as a spiritual gift? This refusal to acknowledge Sachi's grounded human pain left Sachi feeling utterly invisible. She was forced to participate in her mother's spiritual narrative, where her real-world trauma was dismissed as mere cosmic theater, leaving her deeply alienated from the one person who was supposed to protect her. This lack of maternal protection and support constantly stalled Sachi's development and sabotaged her opportunities. When Sachi was a child, she actually landed the coveted role of Scout in the cinematic masterpiece To Kill a Mockingbird. It was a massive opportunity that could have given her a sense of purpose and her own identity. But because of her parents' chaotic lives and complete lack of support, the opportunity was abruptly snatched away, leaving Sachi to return to the shadows of her mother's fame. As she entered her teenage years, the neglect only intensified. Sachi was sent away to expensive, isolated boarding schools in England and Switzerland. She was a nomad with no true home, living out of suitcases and relying on the charity of school administrators while her parents enjoyed their separate glamorous lives on opposite sides of the globe. The peak of this emotional abandonment occurred when Sachi was just 14 years old. It was the Christmas holiday, a time when the boarding school closed down for winter break. All of Sachi's classmates were excitedly packing their bags, talking about the families who were coming to pick them up, and heading home for the holidays. Sachi packed her suitcase and waited in the lobby, expecting her mother or father to send a plane ticket or arrive to collect her. But hours turned into days, and nobody came. There were no phone calls, no letters, and no explanations. Her parents had simply forgotten about her. Sachi was left completely stranded at the empty European boarding school for weeks, wandering the cold, silent corridors alone, eating solitary meals prepared by a skeleton staff, and wondering what she had done to deserve such total, heartbreaking neglect. The final cold rupture came when Sachi turned 17. In most wealthy, high-profile Hollywood families, a child of Sachi's background could expect some level of financial security, college tuition, or at least a modest allowance to help them transition into adulthood. But Shirley and Steve decided that Sachi had reached the age of absolute independence. She was abruptly cut off financially and told, "You were on your own now." With no savings, no higher education, and no parental guidance, Sachi was forced to take on a series of grueling, low-paying service jobs just to survive. She worked as a ski instructor in the freezing winters of New Zealand, a waitress in the tropical heat of Hawaii, and eventually spent 5 years working as a flight attendant for Qantas Airways, ironically serving passengers in the very same cabins where she had once sat as a lonely, terrified 2-year-old. She even worked as an au pair in Paris, taking care of other people's children with the love, warmth, and attention she had never received herself. In her 20s, Sachi decided to return to Los Angeles and pursue her dream of acting. She hoped that entering her mother's professional world would finally create a bridge of connection between them. But the reality was incredibly cold. Shirley did almost nothing to help Sachi's career. In fact, Sachi felt that her mother actively sabotaged her, viewing her own daughter with a sense of professional jealousy and rivalry. Despite this lack of maternal support, Sachi managed to carve out a modest career for herself, landing minor roles in classic films like Back to the Future, Peggy Sue Got Married, and About Last Night, as well as making television appearances on Star Trek: The Next Generation. But she was always running in the massive shadow of her mother, constantly reminded of her secondary status in Shirley's eyes. The decades of quiet suffering, confusion, and psychological trauma finally came to light in 2013 when Sachi published her explosive memoir, Lucky Me, My Life With and Without My Mom, Shirley MacLaine. The book was a raw, unfiltered, and deeply painful account of what it was really like to grow up as the daughter of a legend. Sachi did not write the book out of malice, but as a cathartic attempt to reclaim her own narrative, to heal her inner child, and to finally force her parents to face the reality of their actions. The memoir made national headlines, shocking the public and pulling back the curtain on the dark, neglectful reality behind Shirley MacLaine's enlightened, free-spirited public persona. But the most tragic part of the entire saga was Shirley's reaction to the book. Instead of using the memoir as an opportunity for self-reflection, healing, or reconciliation, Shirley chose to protect her brand. She issued a public statement calling the book virtually all fiction and dishonest. She accused Sachi of fabricating the stories for attention and financial gain, completely dismissing her daughter's lifelong pain and lived experience. By denying Sachi's reality one final time, Shirley proved that her dedication to cosmic truth did not extend to the emotional truth of her own flesh and blood. She preferred the comfortable illusions of her past lives and alien visitations to the painful, grounding reality of her failures as a mother. The story of Sachi Parker's upbringing is a powerful and sobering cautionary tale about the high cost of fame and the dangers of spiritual self-absorption. It reveals how easily the pursuit of stardom and a self-serving philosophy can erode the most basic human instincts of parenthood. Shirley MacLaine looked to the stars and the universe for enlightenment. But in doing so, she missed the most profound spiritual lesson of all, that the most sacred duty we have is to love, protect, and cherish the vulnerable souls we bring into this world. Sachi's survival, her strength, and her ability to build a loving life for her own children show that even the deepest childhood scars do not have to define our future. If you want to understand just how deep the hidden dark side of classic Hollywood really goes, and how other legendary icons treated their families when the camera stopped rolling, you need to watch our next video. We dive deep into the shocking, private family scandals of another beloved screen star, exposing the massive secrets that the studios fought to keep hidden. Click the video on your screen right now to uncover the truth.